Mine's blinking. Is it counting?
It is counting.
Okay, awesome. So give us, ready?
Ready?
Okay, I'm good. Hi, welcome. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Barb Sherman. I am the program coordinator for the Cascade Public Library, and we are doing a series of interviews all about authors in Cascade. And today, I'm privileged to actually have Randy Mead here, and he has written a book that we're going to talk about. So, thank you for coming.
You're welcome. Good to be
So,
here.
this is a memoir. It's about your life. So, what inspired you, and why did you want to write it?
Well, to be honest, for a long time I did not want to talk about what the story is about, and I began to share the story in front of groups of people before there was a book, and the more I shared it, the more I saw. Well, I'll give an example if I can. One of the first groups was in front of about 400 teenage boys and girls at a basketball camp, and I was asked to share this story on the final night of this camp. It was a Christian basketball camp, and so shared the story, and about 2/3 of the way through the story, I looked around and I realized that most of the kids' eyes had tears coming down. I was like, wow. And then so I finished, and that night a lot of the kids were not Christians. They were just kids that were attending, and the idea was to teach them about God and help them if they needed help. But about 100 of the kids gave their lives to Jesus that night, and there was lots of kids crying, and they'd been through a lot of stuff that they could relate to in the story. So from that point on, I began to share with more groups, men's groups, churches, etc. And it just kind of kept evolving until more people started saying, man, you should write this. You should write this and make it a book.
So how long did it take you to write it?
It took, once I got the blessing from my wife to not work for a while, because I literally kind of stopped work for about a year, and we were actually down in Southern California at the time. And I took a year, and true story, we actually somehow got a rental, an apartment that had a deck where we had about a 180-degree view of the Pacific Ocean. It was gorgeous. I mean, on a good day, I might have been able to throw a baseball and hit the water with it. That's how close we were to the water. Not on the ocean, but really close. And I sat up there on this deck, and that's where I began to kind of type this out. Get to typing and get to a spot, and I'd start crying. I'd close the laptop and go for a swim or go for a run on the beach. So, but it took about a year, and it was more work. Writing a book became, I realized then, writing a book, I have a lot of respect for people that write lots of books, because it's not the easiest thing to do. It's pretty challenging.
So did you had some roadblocks or some mind blocks? Or did you already have the story in your head and you just spilled it out?
Well, the story, it being a true life story, was there, and I've always been inclined to write. I've written. Prior to then, I would write short stories or poems, or I was always one of these guys that carried in a little notebook in my back pocket, and somebody'd say something, I'd jot it down. Just always taking notes on things. And so I had part of the material recorded, written, and then memory,
Just put it into words?
Yeah, put it in, assemble it, move it around. Fortunately, I also had an editor. This is a side note. I don't know if I'm taking up too much time.
No.
Okay.
We want to hear it all. Because
Okay.
I was going to ask you about a publisher, so
Okay.
Go ahead.
So not being a professional writer at the time, and still don't consider myself that, I began to literally research online for editors. I thought, it might be a good idea. I initially had sent the story out to probably 50 friends, people that I knew.
Mm-hmm.
So most of them read it, said, "Wow, this is great." Da, 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 da. So we did some editing based on some feedback there. But then I got online. I found several professional editors, and I talked to them. They'd interview me. I'd interview them. They'd read a snippet and give me a quote, and then a little sample of what they could do. I didn't really like any of them. I mean, it was like they're taking my voice out of the story, which I've had people say the story, it feels like we're just sitting in front of the fireplace and I'm just telling a story. And so I wanted it to remain friendlier and more personal that way. So there was an editor by the name of Thomas Womack, who I found his name somewhere, and I saw, wow, he's edited books for some really big name Christian authors, and I just took a shot in the dark, and I contacted him and figured I probably wouldn't even get a response, and he agreed to read a chapter. He ended up reading the whole book, and he said, wow. So that was kind of encouraging to get that kind of a response from a really well-known editor, pretty big name guy, and he quoted me a price, which was way above any budget I want. I said, "I am so sorry, I wasted your time." He says, that's how much it costs to get me to
Right.
and it was way. So I said, I'll just do my best. About a month later, he called me back out of the blue, and he said, "Randy, I will just edit it, and because I love the story, I would like to help you get the story out to the world, and we can clean it up." And so he actually, together we kind of worked together in tandem, back and forth, which is really a neat luxury. You don't get that with all editors. Some of them it's my way or the highway, but he was really, he understood. Great guy, fantastic. Anyway, when he first got it, 75,000 words, came down to about 46,000 words, based on this back and forth and just reducing it. And I learned a ton from a guy that really knew how to get the story concise, because it's different than when you're speaking in front of a group. When you're writing a story, especially nowadays, people they want their information quick,
Yeah.
shorter chapters, and less kind of background stuff. So that's what we did. That's where we ended up.
Okay, so then who published it for you?
Well, so I had two different publishers that actually did review it. One of them, and I don't remember even the name. There weren't any. I didn't even send it to any big name publishers, and there was one of them though that had published a number of Christian books, and they sent me a contract, an agreement, and all this stuff to sign, and they literally had a new title for the book. Are we still?
I think, yeah.
Are we okay? Okay.
Sorry.
So they had a new title, and they were going to change the name, and I won't mention it because they copyrighted that title, and everybody said, "No, the little D and the B. There's something special about that." I mean, that knew the story, and I agreed. And they also were wanting movie rights at the time. I literally had a couple of Hollywood producers
Wow.
that were talking to me about, and I don't know if that probably never happened. We don't lose sleep thinking that that's ever going to happen, but they wanted movie rights, and at the time I was in the middle of a discussion with a producer that really wanted to try to do something with it. That was 2 or 3 years ago, so I don't know that that's ever going anywhere. I've learned that it moves pretty slow in Hollywood,
Yeah.
but anyway, that's a side note. Let's see, where was I?
We were talking about publisher.
Yeah, publisher. Oh, back to the publisher. Yeah, they made the offer, and then I talked to a guy by the name of Run Baby Run. I am drawing a blank as to, he sold 12,000 copies of his book. It's on the back here, actually. Let me see. So, Nikki Cruz. Wrote Run Baby Run. So at the time when I spoke to him, he read this and he said, he wrote a review for us, and he said, do not use a publisher. He said, Randy, you can self-publish. You're going to get just as far. The publishers don't offer, and this may be mixed information, but they don't offer as much as they used to. He said, I've switched and I'm publishing all my own books now. And so I kind of took that as pretty good advice from a very successful author. And so, anyway, I came up with a name, Rough Song Press, but it was actually just a self-published, that's my own little press publishing company.
So the title, Little D and the B. So I know Little D is your mother. Is that correct?
Well, I
Kind
don't know
of.
if we should edit that because that's one of the mysteries that a lot of people say they'll read two-thirds, three-quarters. Now, who's Little D?
Okay.
So
Sorry about that. I'll let that go.
so that's kind of one of those things. People don't know who Little D is until the end.
Okay. So, how many stories are unwritten in your head?
Stories that I may have.
Mm-hmm.
I have. It's weird, but I have a number of ideas for books, and I've actually started on a few different stories, and one of them in particular is there's a dog named Yep, Y-E-P, that's mentioned in Little D and the Bee, and that dog was with me when we lived in Garden Valley years ago, and he would go on these Rocky Mountain Trail adventures, and I'd take people up, backpacking, or friends, we'd go backpacking, and then so this dog, that had so many adventures, like grizzly bears, and I mean just all kinds of stuff. Just an amazing dog. There's about 20 stories about Yep, and back in Garden Valley, the little kids come in and occasionally, tell us another Yep story, tell us another Yep story. And so I'd sit around with the kids and the moms and tell another Yep story. And so that's been on my mind for a long time, right? And people love stories about dogs. It's one of the...
So I go to the Cascade After School program, and I have, on Tuesday afternoons from 4 to 5. And I have one little gal that just loves dog books.
Yeah.
So I'm giving her Old Yeller today. She's a 4th grader.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
hoping, but I'm sure
Yeah.
that she would love to have something a little bit more personal and from somebody that's from around her city or town.
Well, okay, so Yep. So the way this is written, Little D and the Bee sounds like it's a kid's book. It's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's for big people
Right.
more than anything. But Yep it's been so much fun. I've got 2 or 3 chapters written, and I sent it a couple of years ago. I haven't had time. I've just been working to get back on it. I've got all my notes and all the adventures and the outline kind of there ready to go. But 2 or 3 years ago, I sent it to 2 of my friends that had kids that were roughly 7 to 11-ish. And I said, if you have time, read this to your kids and get a response, because I really wanted to kind of have it appeal to kids and adults, because I learned from a friend of mine that's an old, very successful businessman. He said, if you can appeal to the children, the adults will love it too. So I decided, well, I'll make this book tailor-made for the kids and try to, anyway, this story that I'm hoping to write someday. And they read it to these kids, and the response from both kids was something along the lines of, wow, where's the rest of the story about Yep? I love Yep. So that one's a lot of fun. I mean, I laugh as I'm writing that one instead of crying. So it's been a lot of fun.
So do you think you'll get back into finishing that book?
Hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm hoping to one of these days. Right now it's just been a very busy stretch around
Yeah.
Cascades, selling real estate and doing everything.
So your day job is real estate.
Yep.
And then you have a side job. All right, as a handyman.
No, I know. Don't even. No,
Sorry.
I have done. When we moved here, and I moved here about almost 3 years ago, and my wife shortly came after. I was kind of to come up here and see what we could get going. So we built a property management company and a little bit of construction. I had been, contractor years ago. So I was doing handyman, building the vacation rental business. We sold that to some friends of ours just this last summer. And so my full-time job is real estate, and my wife also works. But
So what do you do for fun outside of your work and thinking about writing? What else do you like to do?
One of my loves, as you read the story, well, you'll see there's a couple of fly fishing descriptions in there, and so I love fishing, love fly fishing. Son and I just in the last couple days went snowboarding, and then we did another day of snowshoeing. We ice fish. We do all the recreational activities that you can think of in our neck of the woods here. I mean, we try to do it all as time allows.
So that's winter activities. What do you do for the summer?
Yeah, summer mountain biking, hiking,
Fly fishing.
backpacking, fly fishing,
Camping.
Yeah, we'll hike. We haven't done it in a couple of years, but do one big hike up into the White Clouds or the Sawtooths or somewhere that's
Nice.
kind of fun. So,
Well, thank you, Randy, so much for your time. I
bet.
do appreciate it. So this is Randy Mead with Little D and the B. And this is a series all about authors in Cascades. So I'm glad that you got to join me today.
I was going to say one other thing.
Yes.
If people still wonder what it's about at all, Little D and the B, there was one gentleman, an elderly man, about 90 years old. I had told the story. It was before the book was written. And he came up to me after I had spoke the story, and he said, wow, you should write this because what the world needs more